Welcome. Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. We're rumbling. We're rumbling, John.
I know, love it. Love the intro music.
I'm Robin Adair. This is my co-host with the most, John Jurisic. Great to have you on our program. And we have a great program once again. This seems to be a manna from heaven in terms of former premiers joining us in the Rumble Room. We've just had Gordon Campbell, and now a premier who was with us, she was the premier of the province up until 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And she actually won an election, but then the Greens said, we'll join with you NDPers. Weaver did a deal with John Horgan, and Christy Clark had to step aside. But she moved out of politics, but she certainly hasn't moved out of the scene. She has her own podcast, the ChristyClark.com podcast, the Christy Clark Show. And we thought it'd be great to have her on the program, hear what she thinks about what's going on with pipelines. She used to be very involved in that. And so many other things to talk about with Christy Clark, John. I'm so excited.
Well, so am I. And really, what does that say for the state of the media? That we've got two ex-premiers that are choosing to get onto our show. Clearly, we think our show is the best show. Clearly, we have 48 billion people watching us. But nonetheless, that means that somewhere or another there's a gap in the media scene in British Columbia. If they're choosing the Victoria Rumble Room, we're very honored. We got a ton of viewers from Gordon Campbell's interview, and we're going to get a ton with Christy. But it certainly does say one day, I think, Robin, we should examine the state of the media. We are very, very honored to have Christy, and I cannot wait to Zoom her in.
So let's do that, John. Let's zoom in Christy Clark. Joining us now all the way from that magnificent city of Vancouver is former Premier Christy Clark. So nice to have you in the Rumble Room.
Nice to be back, gentlemen. Nice to see you both.
Absolutely.
It was amazing to think it's been 9 years since you were premier. It doesn't seem that long ago. And in some ways, it seems like it's been forever because of some of the things that have been.
Me, Robin, I'm going to tell you, not from my perspective, but it's just when you watch everything that you worked hard to create and do get completely ripped down to the studs. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I just built a really nice house. Well, I mean, it's not the best analogy, but I just built something with a whole group of people who really cared about it. And then the new owner comes in and just like wrecks the place. It's like,
exactly.
It's like a giant house party of, I don't know.
It's a house party that you don't really want to go to, right?
Yeah.
So
it's been hard to watch, I have to say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of the house party, our current premier, David Eby, has been meeting with the Prime Minister. Mark Carney has been in Vancouver, and he's been talking about what he's going to do about this pipeline. He's signed an MOU with the Premier of Alberta. They're talking about a pipeline going forward in the next year. It could be groundbreaking in a year's time. And Eby says he's standing up for the environment, going to do everything he can to stop this. And, I think back on what he was doing all along on this pipeline stuff up until it got built, which was opposing it. Adrian Dix did the same. And, the NDP, you wonder, what do they think they're doing here? Is this going to be strongly supported by the public? What's the strategy the NDP is following in opposing the pipelines?
Well, I think they have a constituency that they're speaking to, no doubt about it. But remember in 2013, in that election when we were like 30 points behind or whatever it was, Adrian Dix came out and said, you know what, we're not going to do any of this resource development, blah, 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 blah. And we're changing our mind. Like they did a U-turn. And I remember being on the bus, on the campaign bus, and getting all kinds of conflicting or, different opinion about how we should respond. Should we also say that? Da, da, da. And my position on it at the time was, no, I think it's more important to be consistent and have people understand that you're being truthful and you weren't lying to them in the first place than to change your position on something mid-course because it's useful. That was, many people would argue, one of the pivotal points, turning points in the campaign where support started to shift across the lines. And I think part of it was the consistency issue, but I do also think there is bedrock support amongst a lot of British Columbians for resource development. Yeah, we have a big community of people who are anti-resource development in BC. That's what we are. We're kind of, we're the left coast for a reason, but I don't think it's a majority and I don't think it ever has been.
And you know, it's interesting. I'm thinking about watching that press conference when Dix was down in English Bay announcing he was going to block all pipelines when he became premier of the province. You could feel the air sucking out of support for the NDP all across the interior. Blue collar workers, the bedrock of the NDP traditionally, they said, well, what are you doing? Those are our jobs. You're talking about our livelihood. And you could feel the support drifting away. And it was a real turning point. I think it was the biggest mistake made. And now we're seeing David Eby on one hand saying, I'm part of Team Canada. We're gonna defy Donald Trump. We're gonna be a strong, independent country. And yet saying no to this cross-provincial opportunity that benefits both Alberta and British Columbia and the country.
It certainly does. I mean, look what we did with LNG. We started in 2011. No one in North America had an LNG plant. BC got the first. Now I didn't get to actually open it because John Horgan had come into government by then. However, I mean, that created that economic opportunity and all the TMX stuff that was going on, Site C stuff that was going on. That made us the fastest growing economy in the country. So to your point about job creation, these big projects create a lot of jobs for British Columbia, even if the resources, and this isn't the case with LNG, but with oil, originate in Alberta. It's huge for us. So here we are at the bottom of the economic barrel. 15 cents of every dollar that we pay to the government in taxes goes to just pay interest on the debt that they've accumulated. I mean, you'd think that these guys would be desperate for economic opportunities. And instead, like David Eby's still complaining that, oh, it's got to be done, blah, blah, blah. No, just get the damn thing done, for heaven's sakes.
This is a
Just get it
perfect
done.
this is a perfect segue to my question. First of all, Premier Clark, welcome to the Rumble Room. Fantastic to have you on. Of course, I'm an old guy, no hair. Who knows what
You still got some
there's
years
a
left.
there's a birthday somewhere around here. So naturally, I have to go to artificial, AI to figure how can I be reminded of the Clark government's policy? So I go into AI and I check and then there was a sentence summary and I'm going to read it to you. Okay.
Oh
And
dear.
and then I have a question from that, please.
Okay.
Here we go. Christy Clark governed from a pro-growth, pro-resource development perspective that aimed to position BC as a globally competitive energy exporter while balancing environmental and political pressures around pipelines and LNG development. I love the way that captured your attitude towards running government and running this province. My question to you, Premier Clark, is what might be two or three fundamental policy pieces that any government, hopefully an incoming conservative government at some point, should implement to now reflect that great summary of your years in government?
Well, I would say the first thing is creating jobs has to be your number one priority right across government. So that's the very first thing. Second, you need to have a plan to do it. And third is the plan has to include fixed timelines, fixed and predictable timelines for the approval of projects. It has to include government support for all kinds of resource development across the whole province. It has to include training for workers to make sure that we have the workforce that we need. And it has to include ensuring that we are accommodating and consulting and working with First Nations as equity partners, because that's the way things get done in BC. So, not like those aren't that hard to do. Now, the thing that's hard to do that I discovered was put together the plan. Everybody does that. That's what we did, big jobs plan, is executing on the plan. So really, you can have all those big ideas, but the execution is everything. Now, this has been something that has been totally absent in the EB government. I don't know if you noticed. He says one thing and then he doesn't say it's something different. It's just it never happens. Like it just
Oh,
never
nor do
gets
I understand what he's
noticed.
saying. I don't understand what he's saying.
Yes, yes. Well, there's that. So you have to have a plan and you have to have everybody has to know how they fit into the plan. So every deputy minister, every minister, every assistant deputy minister, and they have to do that. But the last thing, John, so it's four things now, is to say we are going to balance our budget and we are not going to grow the civil service. We are not going to increase cost to government unless we can afford it. So we were really, really tough on those two things because balancing the budget means ultimately you have way more money to spend and way more money to leave for your kids. You can have lower taxes and all the rest of that. So, we had a triple A like I don't know what's going on in BC right now. It's so like 15 cents of every dollar. We had the thing shaved down to about a 10 billion dollars less, and we would have eliminated our operating debt. And it's now like at 240 billion again or some big number. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay,
So
oh,
it's
sorry.
possible to do it if you have a plan and you stick with it.
I just want to ask you about the other elephant in the room right now in BC politics, which is our Indigenous relationship and what's been going on in terms of DRIPA and who owns what and what can be built and what permissions everybody needs. We're talking about this pipeline, and Carney is saying we're going to go and get consultation going with the First Nations. And David Eby setting himself up to say, I'm defending the First Nations and I'm standing with them. They're against it, so I'm against it. The tanker ban must be maintained and all of that. What are your views on DRIPA, which the opposition voted for, and they had it in front of the opposition? They voted for it. What are your views on DRIPA, and what should we be doing in the future with our First Nations to right this so that we all benefit as a province?
So can I answer the second question first,
Sure.
which is, what do you mean the First Nations are opposed to it? Like, we went out there and we worked with First Nations and we got LNG deals
Well,
done.
some of the umbrella organizations are against it,
Right,
right?
exactly. But you know what? In BC, Indigenous communities, different communities, are their own nation. So they aren't this whole idea that they're represented by five people on the leadership council is ridiculous. No, they don't see it that way. If you're the Haisla, you're the Haisla. If you're the Niska, you're the Niska. And they're going to do what they want to do in their own territory. And so why not go and work with them directly? That's what we did. So this idea that First Nations don't want to do deals, that First Nations, haven't been included, that they're opposed to reason, it is absolute fantasy. We made those deals. And in fact, we proved that reconciliation was working by creating equity partnerships hand in hand with First Nations. And those First Nations have benefited really well. You go up to Haisla, great school, used to be terrible. Health center, didn't used to have one. Better teachers, better, garbage collection, everything, right? The community is really in the money. Well, more First Nations would have had that opportunity had the Horgan government not taken over. And so that's the first thing. So I don't accept this idea that First Nation reconciliation still hasn't been done. You do it. You just do it every day. And you do it on a nation by nation basis if that's the opportunity that's there. You don't wait for like Stuart Phillip to tell you it's okay. I mean, what has he got to do with the coastal First Nations? Absolutely nothing. So the second part of it, though, is DRIPA. DRIPA is a resolution that was brought by representatives of countries from all over the world to recognize First Nation. It's a resolution that was made by an international body with no reference to Canada or to British Columbia. To think that you could embed that in legislation is ridiculous. And I understand the Conservatives voted for it. They shouldn't have. But, they did it for political reasons, I know, and all that stuff. But it was, in principle, it was the wrong thing to do. They should have said instead, we have been building relationships with First Nations since the Gordon Campbell government around economic opportunity, and the Clark government supercharged that. And look at what we've achieved here. Let's keep at it.
Mm-hmm. It almost feels like you were 10 years too early. I mean, the entire country has now manifested itself behind Prime Minister Carney into getting resource development. And people like me and a whole bunch of British Columbians are really super annoyed that we're getting gobbledygook out of Premier Eby around, I don't know what he's doing, like build. Come on, can we do this in this really unstable world? Okay, Premier Clark, we've sort of framed where you're at. You've obviously got a track record. I'm going to put you in a corner. I'm going to kind of corner you a little bit here. Are there any of the five provincial Conservative Party candidates that reflect your policies and your positions on these things.
Okay, so John, I'm not going to tell you the names because
Okay.
if I start weighing in on this, it's going to create a whole bunch of ripple effects. A whole bunch of partisans are going to go
Fair
nuts,
enough. Yes,
right? Oh
yes.
my God, she's a liberal, blah, 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 blah. Yeah,
Right,
well,
right, right.
Carney's a liberal
Because
too.
just to outline, you're not actually a member of the BC Conservatives, are you?
No.
Mm, okay.
But well, I'm not a member of any provincial party. Now, my provincial party got stabbed in the heart by the leader of BC United at the time. So, um, who knows? It could come back. But I think, in terms of how I governed, I think most people would say it was from a fiscally conservative point of view by a long shot. Socially liberal, I hope. People would remember that. But so I think in the race there are a few people who are more normal than others.
Okay.
And I think there are a few, and here's why I want normal, is because I think normal is the only thing that will beat David Eby. And if we don't beat David Eby, and I appreciate you've got listeners from across the political spectrum, but my view is if we don't beat David Eby, British Columbia gets beat. And we will have another 4 years of this. We can't come back. It will miss.
One of the happy things about the show is we can name people. And so just to throw this your way, and not to say anything bad about it, but in the mail, I just got this wonderful little piece in the mail, and it's from candidate Yuri Fulmer, where he says, will our party stay conservative under Yuri Fulmer, with a question mark? And of course, he's saying it will, or become BC United 2.0 under Liberal Carolyn Elliott. And there have been a lot of aspersions cast at Carolyn Elliott because they're saying that she is a liberal and they don't want to see that. But it strikes me that the old BC Conservative Party is supposed to be a continuation of the BC Liberal Party, which was not the Liberal Party of Canada, and that was predated by the Social Credit Party, which was the amalgamation of Liberals and Conservatives. Is it not still the case that if a center-right organization wants to become government in this country or in this province, they need to join forces, both Conservatives and small L Liberals? And if the Conservatives don't do that, the BC Conservatives insist on being defiantly anti-liberal and conservative and maintaining sort of that division, I don't see how they can win.
Yeah, I think the Conservatives are struggling to transform into what was traditionally a coalition party, right? The social credit. I mean, we all think back to 1952 when W.A.C. Bennett created the social credit. The idea was to get conservatives and liberals together. And then we look at history and we say, wow, every time there's been a split in from the center, from the liberals and the conservatives together, whether it's the Reform Party or whatever, we end up with an NDP government. So we know what the recipe is, to bake this cake, to, a bigger economic pie. Wow. That was a lot of weird analogies there.
I love it.
You remember when Gordon Campbell did the pie ad and everybody trashed him for it? I thought it was a good ad, but anyway, I think the conservatives are still struggling there, and I think Yuri Fulmer frequently says we need to unite the right, and my very strongly held opinion is we need to unite everyone who is not supporting the NDP. That is a big tent we're going to need to build. And so if all you're thinking about is how to unite the right, you're not going to win. There's zero chance of that. So let's expand our chances. Let's beat David Eby. Let's have 4 years of economic renewal ahead. Let's all come together under one big tent. But we need a leader that will welcome us all.
Yeah, and it's happened before. I mean, under Gordon Campbell, you had people like Sheila Orr over in the left, the Liberal Party, very, very strong Liberal.
Very
On the
late.
side, you had Rich Coleman, and they got along great.
Yes. Yes, we had them all. And you know what? Like Laurie Throness and I, for example, I'm absolutely unapologetically pro-choice. Laurie Throness, not so much. But Laurie and I would sit down and talk it through. And I respect the fact that he's got that opinion. It's his view on the world. He's a deeply religious man, and that's his religious take on it. He has the right to have that view, and he has the right to be elected and represent that view. And I don't think that any of us should be sitting around saying, how do we all agree on everything? what we all need to agree on, I would argue, in our, in a non-New Democrat Party, is to say we all agree on growing the economy, creating jobs, lowering taxes, increasing wealth.
Yeah, I have a sense you know the answer to this, but I cannot not ask this question. Um, Often in sort of gatherings with friends, and we chat politics and we chat about the state of the world, and many folks are not very happy with what's happening across the world and how we're having to restructure and reform the way we do almost everything. And one could point the blame all over the place. One of the very obvious reasons for or criteria for blame is that a bunch of men are running the place. And amongst these gatherings, the obvious answer becomes give women a chance to lead. Of course, you were one of 6, 7 female premiers that I believe when you were running BC. There's now one. Has the sort of political climate regressed since that time, making it harder for a female to become a successful politician, in your viewpoint?
I don't know if there's been a regression, John. I think I would say it just has been status quo. It just hasn't gotten any better. I mean, it was an interesting moment when all these women got elected. You're quite right. It was a moment in Canadian history we've never had before. I remember Dalton McGuinty sitting around the premier's table going, God, I'm the only guy here for practically for a
You'd be
while.
on CBC and there'd be like 6 female premiers, It's like,
I know,
wow.
I know. It was really weird and weird and wonderful. But so I'm not sure it's gotten better or worse. I do think that I would say that my experience and observation of others, women, is that the press coverage of women is terribly sexist. There's no doubt about that. The media looks at women with a completely different, comes at women with a completely different sort of aggression
Do you really think so?
than
When actually so many reporters today, Christy, far more than when I was in the business, are women. I mean, look at newsrooms. Newsrooms are very heavily weighted now with female reporters. Do you think that they're even harder on female candidates or female politicians than their male counterpart?
Well, I don't think that women are necessarily nicer to women. But look at our press gallery. Who's there? Justine Hunter? She's never even hardly ever even in the gallery, right? To try and, where all of the kind of the culture is shared. Like how, I mean, it's all guys. It's almost all guys. So I mean, really, I guess when I think about this, Robin, I think about this in terms of the press gallery, which is where most of the coverage is generated about politicians. And it's a pretty uncomfortable, I would argue, pretty uncomfortable world for women. And I think part of it is just, I think that men share a lot in common and women share a lot in common in terms of our experience of the world. So, to be very generous about it, I think that what feels like sexism a lot of the time is actually just that we do speak in different languages a little bit or different accents maybe. And so I think it's sort of hard for for men and women to have a really um,
Aligned,
a dialogue that
aligned
feels
dialogue.
natural between us.
I want to steer us back, Premier, to the ECDEV file, because that's a passionate file of mine, and I want to reinforce some of your earlier comments that potentially some of those conservative candidates might be watching, thinking, implementing, doing whatever. In my opinion, this current provincial government has ruined our economy, and specifically in the ways of affordability. There's lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable energy, lack of affordable food. You fill in the blank. It's not affordable to live. Very difficult, especially for young people. The economic development environment, which under your government, under Campbell's government, under previous governments, was exciting. BC was an exciting place to live in. It was you could take advantage of opportunities and move yourself ahead and reach your goals. Gone. Tons of uncertainty these days. We referenced the First Nations file. There are things government can do to make that a little more certain, I think. Of course, there's global uncertainty. Yet again, what are some of the policy pieces that you would encourage those 5 candidates, of which I think are imminently going to be government? One of them is going to be premier sooner than later. to implement to start turning this economic disaster around?
The first thing they need to do is they need to support they need to have a plan for economic growth. That's the very, very first thing that you do. And it needs to be focused on jobs. You want to win an election? Talk about jobs. Have a real plan for actually creating those jobs. People remember what it was like. How many people left British Columbia last year? 50,000?
Yeah.
Like, who leaves British Columbia?
Right.
That's crazy. Who goes from British Columbia to Alberta? I love Alberta. My sister lives there. But honestly, British Columbia is a pretty damn nice place. Right? Kelowna, Victoria, Vancouver, my goodness. So I would say, have a jobs plan to create jobs. Make sure that that jobs plan is something that you're going to execute on and that everybody knows what they're going to try and do. Recruit really good candidates so that you have some real muscle in cabinet. And, like Carney's got, he's got a few guys mostly guys that he's brought around him that I think have made a big difference in terms of being able to get things done. So you need a really good slate of candidates. You need a really good plan, and you need to be 100% focused on making sure the civil service is delivering that plan. And one of the things that we've seen, and this is going to be a really hard thing if there's a new government coming in, is to slim down the civil service, because my experience of it was the more people you have in the civil service, the more people you have as are part of making every decision. And we all know that if you've got 10 people in sequentially you need to make a decision, it takes a lot longer to make it than if there's three. So they need to figure out how they slim down the civil service. Carney's got to do the same thing in Ottawa. Much bigger task for us here in British Columbia, because it's not just the costs that are embedded in the collective agreements and the size of it. And that was all John Horgan, by the way. I mean, you look at David Eby's growth of the civil service under his tenure, it's actually been quite modest compared to the massive increase that we saw in the Horgan years. If you slim that down and you make it, you'll find that you get decisions a lot faster. You'll save money for the taxpayer, but you'll also be able to make decisions more expeditiously. And you want to make this province investable again, you got to convince them to do it. That's one key way to do it. And that, I would argue, is probably the biggest issue facing the government, the hardest issue to solve facing the incoming government, should it change.
Well, on that note, we're going to thank you, Christy Clark. This has been illuminating. You always deliver. I said to John before we even started this interview that you're one of the great, great speakers that I've met in my time. You can get up on a bench just about anywhere and just do a speech and just let your feelings be known and articulate so well. And you certainly did that for us in the Rumble Room, and we really thank you. Outstanding.
Well, it's been an honor to be with you, Robin and John. I haven't seen either of you in real life in quite a while, so it's been a real pleasure. And I know you've got a big audience. And can I just add at the end here, thechristyclarkshow.com. If you're interested in the things we're talking about, I've had Jason Kenney on, John Bolton, I've had Peter Mansbridge on, I've got Thomas Muller coming up, one of the greatest soccer
Thomas
players
Muller, wow, that's
in
cool.
history, in modern history, is going to be coming on, and some other big guests. So thechristyclarkshow.com, if you want to log on, if people want to find out more, and if you do, follow me.
Excellent. We'll do that. And in the meantime, for our audience, including our many valued viewers in Alberta, who we love, by the way, rumble on.